Zach, good morning to you. I was going to ask about Caleb Williams and how he has looked in camp. Yesterday I read didn't look great in the scrimmage, but is that just a small sample size or is that indicative of what you've seen thus far?
Yeah, first off, good morning. It's been up and down, but it's kind of been right where I thought it was going to be at this point in training camp. They've had 10 practices, new offense, new head coach, a couple of new weapons. I expected them to be behind the defense in these practices, but I think it's just kind of the inconsistencies of not stringing together 3 to 4 good days. I'd say out of the 10, they've probably had 2 in a row in terms of stringing together good days in practices, and that was actually, these past couple of days. And then they come out and the defense dominates the Family Fest scrimmage. So, yeah, I mean, there's been some inconsistencies. There's been some good with Caleb Williams as well, though. But I do think it's got to kind of get better here in the coming days for a lot of Bears fans to feel comfortable going into Week 1.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that video that went viral. And I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It's when he's throwing at targets and he misses all 4. And then he kind of storms off and it looks like kind of a child about to throw a tantrum. And again, I feel like this is the most alarming part of it. Not the fact that he's missing the targets, but the emotion here. And we've seen this from Caleb Williams in the past in college football. And that was one of the markdowns I think some people had, is that he wears his emotions on his sleeves. And in the NFL, you're going to face some failure and you're going to face some adversity. Have you seen any other examples of this in camp, or is this just a one video situation?
This is actually the one-off situation. I know the video you're talking about. I was standing right there. I wasn't watching that drill because I do like to watch Eric Bieniemy and Antoine Randall do the running backs and wide receiver drills. But I did see the video, and I saw what you're referencing at the end of it, and kind of storming off a little bit, and not a great look. But no, I mean that's the first time I've seen anything like that in training camp. And I'll go back. I believe it was one of the first couple practices. Ben Johnson got on Caleb Williams. The first team offense was just not up to standard. They weren't getting set at the line of scrimmage. They were taking too long to get the play calls in, and he pulled the first team from a drill. And he went right at Caleb Williams, and he let him know, that's unacceptable, and you can't do that. And we kind of watched that, and we're kind of like, well, how's Caleb going to react? And I mean, he took it. He reacted well. They talk after almost every play or every drill in practice. So, yeah, I haven't seen anything like that. And I've seen Ben Johnson get on multiple players so far this offseason, including Caleb a couple times. I will say, though, looking at last year and what he had to go through, and, there was a lot of frustrations. There was a lot more frustrations than was reported or was shown, to the public during some of those games, the Washington game, the Detroit game, where, you kind of felt like things were, going downhill and it was the end for Matt Eberflus. And we never really saw any of that stuff, whether it be in the locker room, on the field, in practice. So, yeah, to answer your question, I do think it was just kind of a one-off. And, I think he just really cares. He wants to win. He really wants to win. He really wants to change the narrative here in Chicago because there's a lot of pressure on him this year going into year 2.
Zach, is part of this maybe expected because the Bears, by their own admission, are treating Caleb like a rookie because, as you alluded to, he has to relearn so many things and an entirely new system?
Yeah, I think so. I think, last year they pretty much wasted a year, essentially.
Yeah.
You could tell from the start, Shane Waldron just wasn't – I remember sitting in a press conference, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to go well for them. And, 4 or 5 weeks into the season, whatever it was, he was gone. And, his pass game coordinator, Thomas Brown, actually ended up being his offensive coordinator and then head coach. So, yeah, he went through a lot. So I do think it's expected. And Ben Johnson told us from day one, they're going to build this from the ground up. That starts at the quarterback position. He's going to review the film. He's going to sit down with Caleb, and they're just going to, go through it all. And I think that's what we're seeing now. They have, what they call, quote-unquote, installs for these training camp practices and what stage they're at. So there's about 10 to 12 of them, and I believe they're only at 7 or 8 right now. So, yeah, it's pretty much what I expected. I didn't expect them to go out and, light it up. And I know fans want to, they fall in love with the highlight plays, and I don't blame them. There haven't been a lot from training camp, but there's been times where, guys been wide open down the field. Williams is, throwing a beautiful ball, and the defenders, defensive pass interference to prevent a touchdown. So, yeah, there's been good, but there's also been a couple inconsistencies as well.
Yeah, I think my question would be is, should we expect a bit of a slow start from this Bears team? Because anytime you get a new head coach and a new offense, and when you have a younger quarterback, sometimes it's tough to get in a groove early on, especially with Ben Johnson's offense, which everybody looks at the Lions, they say, wow, what an offense. But he also had a ton of great pieces and a ton of great weapons, and a veteran quarterback in Jared Goff. So how do we see this Bears team starting out?
Yeah, right now, I think it'd be fair to say we probably should expect a little bit of a slower start that first game. And it's not going to be easy. They're going against Brian Flores in a really good Minnesota Vikings defense. So I think that's natural. Yeah, you can expect a slow start. But like you said, there's a lot of pieces. There's a lot of motion in Ben Johnson's offense. It's complicated. And he did have the skill players in Detroit. I think he's got a lot of skill players here. But I think it's all got to come together. And one thing that, kind of worries me, and if this changes, I would probably change my answer, but we've seen a lot of delay of game penalties. We're seeing a lot of times where they're just not getting out of the huddle on time. There's players confused on where they want to line up. And it's gotten to the point where, Ben actually addressed it after Family Fest yesterday and essentially said, yeah, we got to fix this. It's not, this is not right, and call the whole practice sloppy. So, if they get that fixed, I would probably change my answer a little bit. And, and it's not to say in a couple of weeks, they could have the whole thing figured out and they probably wouldn't have a slow start. But, yeah, we're seeing a little bit. And it's not, it hasn't been DJ Moore or Roma Dunze. It's been more like Luther Burden, who's just kind of getting back from an injury, not lining up in the right spot at a time. But getting in and out that huddle, that starts with Caleb Williams. That starts with him having to make sure everyone's in the right spot and the motions are right and the guys are going in the right direction, and all that is good. So, yeah, as of right now, though, I would say, would not shock me if there was a slow start for them the first couple of weeks.
Zach, outside of being vocal and being competent compared to Matt Eberflus, what has Ben Johnson brought to the table based on what you've seen?
Yeah, practices feel a lot different. They feel a lot smoother. Mm-hmm. You mentioned outside the vocal, but yeah, the vocal is probably the biggest thing. Getting on players, every detail matters. If there is something that he doesn't like about a drill or a play, they're going to do it again. He's going to make sure he talks to that player if someone messed up. It's not just okay, let's move on to the next drill. And we kind of saw that with Matt Eberflus, where it was like, okay, let's just kind of move on, and it just feels a lot. He's saying, but it just feels like a lot different. It's just like more smooth. The assistant coaches, they're all very vocal, and they're not just getting on the top guys. They're getting on everyone. They're getting on players that, no offense, will not be on the 53-man roster and probably won't hear from them again. But yeah, the operation of these practices and how he runs them is smoother, and his answers in press conferences have just been so refreshing. It's none of the, he's out week to week, we don't know the injury. It's we get clear injury. This is what happened. This is what we expect. So that's been very refreshing as well.
Yeah. So let's allow our heads to be in the clouds for a minute. What is the best possible scenario, you think? Where is the top end potential for this Bears team? Can they win the division?
Yeah, but if everything goes right, they're in probably the best division in football, or arguably the best division in football. I think the best case scenario for them, Caleb Williams takes that next step. He gets over the 4,000 passing yards. I don't know if he'll get the 70% completion percentage. Only 5 quarterbacks got that last year, and that's one of his goals. But he hovers, around the 65, 66%. Over 4,000 yards, he clicks, the offense is clicking. Yes, I could see them winning the division. But, in terms of being a contender in the NFL or NFC, I think they're probably another year or two away from that. They have such a tough schedule at the end of the year, and they got to go to Cincinnati and Baltimore in a span of 3 to 4 weeks on the road, and it's tough. But if everything goes right, yeah, I mean, they could be a surprise win the division because there's still a lot of question marks, even though those three teams did go to the playoffs. J.J. McCarthy, what's he going to be like? How, will Detroit regress, and what do you get from Green Bay this year? So, yeah, if everything goes right, Caleb takes that next step, he can show he can be, potential for a top 5, top 10 quarterback in this league.
Zach, we only have a couple minutes left here, so I wanted to ask this quickly, but I know you cover North Carolina as well a little bit. Do you have high expectations for Bill Belichick this season?
I think you have to, right? I think you went out and you got someone like Bill Belichick. You better win games because it was disappointing at the end. They had a lot of talent, in the Mac Brown era. Sam Howell, Drake May, that's just at the quarterback position alone. Marion Hampton, but at the running back, and they didn't. I think they won one bowl game. So yeah, I think you have to have high expectations for Bill Belichick. And if you ask me about a slow start there, I think they'd have a slow start. And I'm not looking. I don't think they're going to be dominant this year. I think they'll barely squeak into a bowl. But once he gets his recruiting class in and a transfer class, I think they'll be better. What would it be, 2026?